Well, welcome to the September International Video Conference for Citizens Climate Lobby Volunteers. Our Executive Director, Mark Reynolds, asked me to fill in for him this month, and I'm really happy to get to do that. If you don't know me yet, I'm Madeline Para, and I'm CCL's Vice President of Programs. And I want to say a special welcome to everybody on the call who's new to CCL, and especially to our new chapters. In August, we started 9 new chapters in the United States, and a new group in Canada and Nigeria. And then just last week, so technically September, we have a new group in Burundi and in Liberia. That just blows my mind. So welcome to all of you. We're really glad to have each and every one of you with us. So as always, we're going to hear from a guest speaker, and we're really excited about having Dr. Haidt with us today. And I get to share what's new since last we were together and tell you the action focus for the coming month. So our guest speaker, as I said, is Dr. Jonathan Haidt. He's a professor of ethical leadership at New York University Stern School of Business. He's the author of The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And his most recent book is The Coddling of the American Mind. And he's launched a web platform called Open Minds that is intended to do just that. If you've ever participated in one of our trainings on conservative outreach, you've probably encountered Dr. Haidt's work on moral foundation theory, because we found that really helpful. So we share a common interest with you, Dr. Haidt, in strengthening our ability to work across political ideology and find common ground. But before I turn this call over to you, I want to tell you a little bit about the people on this call. We have chapters in 90% of US congressional districts, and as you heard, around the world. And this monthly call is how we remind ourselves that we're not alone in this work, how we educate ourselves, and how we maintain a common focus for our climate advocacy. Well, you'd think that our volunteers would slow down in August, and yes, many of them did go on vacation, but nevertheless, in the United States, they also collectively held 81 lobby meetings during the August congressional recess. They passed the milestone of getting 1,000 public endorsements for HR 763, 1,000 people, which would enact carbon fee and dividend. They passed 9 new municipal resolutions in support of the bill and added 3 co-sponsors to that legislation since the beginning of the month for a total of 62 co-sponsors. And then in this busy vacation month, they published 374 letters to the editor, which is our highest monthly total yet for the year. So you're talking to some very, very committed people. And to give you an idea of how they do their work, I just want to share a quick story from one of our citizen lobby teams. This team's Republican member of Congress cast a favorable vote on a climate issue earlier this summer, and they opened up the meeting by appreciating him for that. And then they handed him a newspaper clipping of a letter to the editor that one of them had written praising his vote. And the member of Congress, he looked at the clipping and he read it, and then he said, "Aw, you didn't have to do that, but I really appreciate it." And then he folded up the clipping and put it in his shirt pocket. So they went on to have their best meeting ever, and that included 3 economists from his district who were among the 3,500 economists that had signed a letter of support for carbon dividends. And the member of Congress, he peppered those economists with question after question about carbon pricing and carbon dividends. So this lobby team exemplified 2 of CCL's best practices. First of all, name your member of Congress in your letters to the editor and share it with them, and then bring in trusted messengers to your meeting. So Dr. Haidt, thank you for being with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you now, and for those of you who are listening, you can put questions in the chat.
Well, thank you so much, Madeline. First, just confirm that you can hear me on this microphone. Am I coming in clearly?
You are coming in fine.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, this is a real pleasure. I had no idea that your organization was so big. 117 groups are on this call. You're in so many countries. This is very, very exciting. Also, I spent a little bit of time on your webpage, and you are speaking my language or speaking love poems to me when you write things like, "Our consistently respectful, nonpartisan approach to climate education is designed to create a broad, sustainable foundation for climate action across all regions and political inclinations." Wonderful. I'm in the office this morning writing a paper on how writing an essay on how social media may well be the death of democracy. It's quite possible that social media changes certain parameters that make the democratic process go haywire in the United States and in many other countries. But at least it's nice to see that here's one case where the technology, the ability to mobilize a grassroots movement, this is the dream that many people had 15 years ago of what these new technologies could do for a healthy democracy. So I'm sort of out of the ugly part and into the positive part. So thank you for this invitation. Let me also verify, I am still coming in clearly. I'm not speaking too fast. Everything's good? Okay.
No, you're doing just fine. Thank
Great.
you.
Okay, so I think the plan is for me to speak for about 10 or 12 minutes first, and then field questions.
No, we have about 10 minutes for questions. Yeah.
Okay.
We stick to that. Yeah.
So I think a framework that I find is usually helpful is I just take my book, The Righteous Mind. There are 3 parts to it. There are 3 principles of moral psychology. And almost any complicated situation you can imagine, any disagreement, any political conflict, just apply the 3 principles and it usually shows you some things that you might not have seen. So let's just go through them. The first principle of moral psychology is that intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. That means our brains are neural networks, they're pattern matchers. If you're exposed to anything, a person, an argument, your brain reacts within a second, much less than a second. It's almost immediately tilts either towards or away from the person or the argument. We like something before we even understand it. And so once a person has reacted, if they react negatively, there's very little you can do to reason them towards a positive view. If they react positively, they're leaning towards you. All you have to do is give them some confirmation of of this idea that they like, and now they know that you're right because they want to believe it and they have reasons to believe it. So it's very, very important that you keep your eye on the intuitions and not get too caught up in the reasons, at least at first. A metaphor that I used in my first book, The Happiness Hypothesis, is that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant. The rider is our conscious reasoning. The elephant is the other 99% of our minds. It's a very large animal. It's a very smart animal, but it doesn't have language. It doesn't use reason in the same way that the small rider does. So whenever you're trying to persuade people, it doesn't matter if you have 23 great arguments and a lot of data lined up. If your presentation or your proposal has alienated or disgusted or offended the elephant, that's a very large creature. It's going to be pulling away from you, and you can't convince the rider to make the elephant go towards you. All right, that's the first point. Now, on climate messaging in particular, there's a lot of research on this. I'll just mention one story that I have a whole file of climate relevant research. Here's one study, Challenging Moral Attitudes with Moral Messages by Andrew Luttrell, Richard Petty, and a few others. And what they did was they ascertained whether people's attitudes on the environment were based more on moral convictions or practical concerns. And then they gave people arguments that were either moral arguments or practical arguments. And what they found, not surprisingly, is, and I quote, participants with an attitude based mostly on moral considerations were more likely to change their mind if they read a moral message than if they read a practical message, and vice versa. So in general, you have to know if somebody's view on climate change is based on emotion and morality, you can't change that with data. You have to start with emotion and morality and then give data. I'm not saying be a demagogue. I'm not saying just appeal to emotions, but you have to be smart about how the human animal responds, makes decisions, what people care about. And they care a lot more about their groups and their prestige, their reputation, than they do about the truth in general. So that's the first point. Intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. All right, so now let's move on. Let's go into more detail. What are these intuitions? So the second principle of moral psychology is that there's more to morality than harm and fairness. And this idea, this is my original research in moral psychology when I was in graduate school and as a postdoctoral researcher. I was trying to understand, how can it be that morality is different around the world? It's different even within one country. It's different across social class, different between urban and rural. Yet we're all human beings. We all have the same evolutionary history. We all have the same kinds of brains. And the theory that I and my colleagues came up with is that the moral mind is kind of like the way our tongues are. Our tongues have 5 different taste receptors on them. We evolved to have tongues that are responsive to sweet, sour, salt, bitter, and umami, or MSG, which is a chemical component that's in meat. So our evolutionary history as omnivores guided us to like some things and dislike others. We like ripe fruit. We don't like unripe fruit. In the same way, our moral minds evolved so that we like certain social patterns that were good for us ancestrally. So our minds respond to issues of care, fairness, liberty, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. These are the 6 foundations of morality. There are more than 6, but these are the 6 major ones that come up in political disputes. And the empirical finding that my colleagues and I have, in fact, if you go to yourmorals.org, the site is down this week for some reason, but it should be up in a couple of days. If you go to yourmorals.org, you can take our moral foundations questionnaire. And what we've learned there is that people, when you come to the site, if you say what your politics are, people who say that they're on the left give very high ratings on matters of care and fairness as equality. That's their moral world: care for the vulnerable and fairness as equality. Whereas social conservatives are a little lower on care. They're high on fairness, but fairness as proportionality. And they're higher than progressives on loyalty, authority, and sanctity. So once you understand this, that there are different, sort of like different moral taste buds, or rather, morality for progressives is based on 2 taste buds especially, and morality for conservatives is based on all 6, especially loyalty, authority, sanctity are the ones that people on the left often don't understand. Well, now you can understand how you can broaden the appeal. Here's a quote from, so Ted Nordhaus, I don't know what you guys think of him, but I find him to be one of the most interesting thinkers on environmental issues. He talks about the way that NeoMalthusian notions of scarcity, that is, the way that people on the, sometimes people on the far left, make it seem as though it's a zero-sum game where there's only so much oxygen, we're going to, choking for oxygen. This way of thinking about zero-sum conflicts produces calculations that are well suited to both eco-panic on the far left and nationalism on the far right. He says environmental obsessions with purity and contamination, that's this last foundation, a sense of spiritual purity. These obsessions might fit quite comfortably with either the thinking of the far left or with ethno-national identity politics. Now, meaning that you even find among right-wing and white supremacist groups, even they are capable of treating the homeland as this pure space. Now, I'm not advocating that you make white supremacist appeals. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have these minds with all these different moral buttons or taste buds. And if you focus always on suffering animals and the fish in the ocean. Oh, and he says, he has a great quote here. Hold on a second. He had, where is it? Oh, I forget where the quote is. Oh yeah, here it is. Appeals to intergenerational equity and the vulnerability of the global poor simply can't compete with concerns about what a carbon tax, let's say, would do to local manufacturers, local economy. His point about that how the left tends to appeal to intergenerational equity, that does not resonate on the right, and the vulnerability of the global poor, that also doesn't really resonate as much on the right. So I think, and some researchers have found, that if you talk about what makes America great, our enormous natural beauty, our national parks, if you develop a sense of pride in the country and a sense of stewardship for our amazing natural resources, this is a way of broadening the appeal rather than just saying intergenerational equity or the global poor. So try to use all the different taste buds, try to craft arguments that will appeal to even a sense of patriotism, nationalism, group loyalty, stewardship in the Bible. So that's the second point. I imagine if you're like many of the groups that I've worked with, most of you are on the left, but there are some who are center right, and you don't have a lot on the far left, although you might, but it's generally speaking, the challenge is more how do you speak to conservatives? And we'll get into that in a moment, that there are subtypes of liberals and of conservatives. The third point, the third principle of moral psychology is morality binds and blinds. Now, what you have to understand about human beings is that we're primates. We're primates that are only a little different from other primates. We evolved to live in small groups that are in constant conflict with neighboring groups. So we're very, very good at doing tribalism. We love to be a tribal group locked in conflict with another tribal group. We love that so much that we invented team sports. Why else would so many people waste so much time and money to watch a group of men bashing their heads into each other, let's say, every Sunday morning or whatever it is? So we are tribal creatures, and our tribalism can get turned up or down. Even tribal societies are not always in conflict. They're actually quite good at cooperating with neighboring groups. So you have to understand the American culture war has been a long-running attempt by politicians and media organizations and moral or political entrepreneurs, we might say, to get people on the left furious about certain issues and furious at people on the right, and people on the right furious about certain issues and at people on the left. Now, since the 1980s or before, the central issue was the role of government. So one tribe says there are huge problems, especially with capitalism and neoliberalism. Only government can help us. Only government can solve the problems. So the left tends to want government solutions. The right tends to say, no, government is the problem. Government is corrupt and incompetent. The market is amazing. Businesses are vibrant and dynamic, and they tend to solve problems much better. And I want to share with you an observation, which I think is very important, from Glenn Beck. When I started writing The Righteous Mind, this was around 2007 or so, when I started working on this book, I was always on the left. Now I'm a centrist, but I was always on the left. And I made it a point to listen to right-wing radio to try to understand them. And around 2007 or so, I heard Glenn Beck say, the left will tell you that they're trying to save the planet and they're trying to save the oceans and the animals. But it's not about that. It's about control. They really just want to control the economy. They want to tell you what kind of car you can drive, what kind of light bulbs you can use. They want to shut down, et cetera, et cetera. So he goes on and on about how it's really just about controlling the economy. And I thought, all right, this is, I see why he's saying that, but this is kind of paranoid. I mean, the climate crisis is real. I mean, the global warming was very visibly real by then. I thought this was kind of paranoid. Well, fast forward to the Green New Deal. What is the Green New Deal? It is exactly what Glenn Beck warned about. It is exactly what he diagnosed in 2007 as what the left was going to do. In other words, it's a giant bill that says we need all the things we've always said we need. High minimum wage, free healthcare, free everything. We need this, and that's the only way that we can solve the climate crisis. So no wonder a lot of people on the right are not on board, are not on the boat, because we're in a polarization cycle where people on the far left, and again, I totally blame the many people on the right for denying that this is a crisis. I tend to criticize the left more because I'm in a university environment where the right has no influence. It's not part of my world. Some excesses of the far left are what make it difficult to find the truth. But my point is that the Green New Deal is perfectly crafted to turn off as many conservatives, Republicans, and libertarians as humanly possible. I don't see how they could support climate change legislation now. In fact, it's even worse than that. There's a very interesting phenomena called solution aversion, researched by Troy Campbell and Aaron Kay. I'll just read you from the abstract. They say, they found that people's evaluation of scientific evidence was very different depending on whether they saw the policy implications of the science as politically desirable. Republicans and Democrats read a statement asserting that global temperatures will rise 3.2 degrees in the 21st century. They were then asked to evaluate a proposed policy solution to address the warming. When the policy solution emphasized government regulation, such as a tax on carbon emissions, only 22% of Republicans said they believed the temperature projection was accurate. In other words, when you say the temperature is going to rise 3.2 degrees, and to fight it, we have to impose taxes and do things that you're not going to like, Republicans say, I don't even believe your projection. I don't think the Earth is warming that much, or I don't think it's warming at all. Conversely, when the proposed policy solution emphasized the free market, 55% of Republicans accepted the basic science. So we're not saying that if the solution is pleasant to Republicans, they will embrace the solution. That's not what this is about. it's a basic factual question. Is the Earth warming? And if your solution is threatening to them, then they say, no, the Earth is not warming. But if your solution is not threatening to them, then they're willing to say, yeah, the Earth is warming. So it's extremely important that you understand that we are in a culture war with two tribes that have different moral foundations, that have a whole bunch of moral entrepreneurs on each side trying to get them angry and to hate the other side. And it's getting worse and worse every year. The hatred of each side for the other is higher and higher. That's been going up very steadily since the early 2000s. So that's where we are. I think I probably used up my time. There's a lot more I could say. We can talk about possible solutions or ways that you can conduct yourself in ways that might be more effective. I'll wait and see where the discussion goes. But that's my presentation to you, that if you understand these three principles of moral psychology, you'll be much more effective in persuasion and in truly listening to people and understanding what their concerns are. So to recap, intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. There's more to morality than harm and fairness, specifically liberty, loyalty, authority, sanctity. And morality binds and blinds. We get bound into tribal teams that get very narrow-minded, and then we're off to the races, or we're off to war, basically. I'll stop there, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Great. Dr. Haidt, that was really, really useful. A lot of very practical stuff that I think is resonating with our folks. While we wait to see what comes in on the chat, would you just tell us a little bit about the Open Mind platform that you started, and do you think that would be useful to us, or how are you using that?
Yes. Oh, thank you. That's a great idea. So The Righteous Mind is a book that I wrote, and I wrote it while I was teaching political and moral psychology at the University of Virginia, and I developed a way of helping my students to understand each other. My goal was not to push them to the center, it was to make them more open to other people. But that takes a long time, it was a whole semester. And as I began to get more and more concerned about 4 or 5 years ago, that universities now have so little political diversity among the professors in particular, I thought, wow, somebody ought to make available the best ideas on the left, the right, and libertarian to college students. And so I made this viewpoint diversity reading list. I just put together the best readings and videos. And then this wonderful young woman who was working with me as a research assistant, Caroline Mell, came to me and said, John, students are not going to want to go through a reading list. It's boring. We have to make this a kind of a journey with multiple steps, and we can gamify it, give them points as they go along. So Caroline totally repackaged it, built it out into what's called the Open Mind platform. And if you go to openmindplatform.org, you'll see it. It's free to use. You can, with your groups, it's perfect. Do it in your groups. Anytime you're trying to get people to talk about anything that's politically polarized or polarizing, if you do Open Mind first, if everybody in the group does Open Mind, your discussions will go better. People will be more open, more humble, more interested in the other side. And basically, it just walks you through the basic moral psychology. First, it starts by trying to trigger feelings of humility, recognizing that we're all so biased and so focused on self-presentation that we're often wrong. And we all know this. We all know that we're hypocrites. We all know we're prone to this. So we try to trigger feelings of humility with quotes from the ancients. Then we go through the basic social and moral psychology, some of what I just did with you. Then we go through how to escape from your moral matrix, how to step out of your moral framework. And then how do you talk to others? So yes, I think that CCL is the perfect kind of community with lots of smaller groups that I would urge you all to check it out and consider doing it. It does take 2 to 3 hours total to do the whole course. It's 5 modules, but I think you'll find it makes you more effective.
Cool, thank you. Ricky, what do we have in the chat in terms of questions?
Yeah, so one of the questions, I guess one of the themes of the questions coming in, and this give you the 30-second version of your answer here, but how do you change people's minds, the people who you disagree with? Like, I know that's a long probably answer, but can you give us some ideas of things that our volunteers can try?
Sure. So if you think about it as though you first have to speak to the elephant, that's your first job. Don't even speak to the rider until you have good rapport with the other person's elephant. So what that means is you need to be likable yourself. So be polite, be friendly. Read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Everybody should do that. You know, remembering people's names, building rapport, pointing out common interests, emphasizing shared identities. We all care about this country, or we all care about our children, or we're, you know, so really start by drawing a circle that includes you and the other person. Don't ever start off by saying, you know, why do you guys believe X? That's totally wrong. So first speak to the elephant and build rapport and develop a relationship. And then the technique that I use, which I think is very important, is be sure to start by acknowledging something that that person or their side is right about, or something that your side is wrong about. So if you're on the left, you could easily point to say, you know, I mean, a lot of people on the left are so opposed to nuclear energy, or so opposed to market-based solutions, or something where, you know, the right has consistently pointed out that, you know, government treaties tend to do nothing, or whatever. You can just acknowledge something that you think they're right about. And it's amazing what happens. If you come out saying, you know, I'm wrong about something, my side's right, or your side's right, that sets up, there's a very deep principle of reciprocity. So if I grant that your side is right about something right off the bat, that puts a little conversational pressure on your side to grant that my side is right about something. So there's a whole chapter on reciprocity. The happiness hypothesis, chapter 2, is on reciprocity. The righteous mind has a lot on it. So there are all kinds of techniques. If you read either The Righteous Mind or, again, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and one of the most brilliant books ever written in social psychology and human relationships, you'll get a lot of ideas there. Oh, and then once you're sort of done speaking to the elephant, of course you need to give reasons too. I would never say just appeal to emotions. Now you're ready to give reasons. But when you give your reasons, don't give the reasons that are most persuasive to your side. Give the reasons that would be most persuasive to the other side. It's basic common sense, but yet we don't do it. There's research by Feinberg, what's his name, at Stanford, showing that when you tell progressives and conservatives to argue against the other side, they spontaneously make arguments that their side likes. But if you teach them about moral foundations theory and tell them, make some arguments about like loyalty or about care, they can do it, and then they're more persuasive.
Cool. Ricky, I think we got time for another one.
Okay, I guess the other question, I guess the biggest theme question that people have coming in is, do you have some examples of people who have used this type of approach, you know, and understood other people's moral foundations first and spoken to the elephant, where it's actually seeing that they have been able to change their mind, or maybe change some minds in that tribe?
Mm-hmm. Well, I get emails from people every week telling me about how it's allowed them to deal with and even respect their father-in-law or their brother or something. So it is people, my goal was to put this out there so that people would actually get along better with each other across all kinds of divisions. So I know that within families where you're locked together, you can't just cancel the person or run away. I know that the book and the techniques work there. As I said, there is research specifically on climate conversations. So if you go to righteousmind.com, and then you click on the tab about the book, and then down to discussions of the book. I haven't updated this in many years, but there's a whole page. When the book came out, I started collecting research using the ideas in the book. And if you go down near the bottom of that page, I have a bunch of citations, discussions of environmentalism. And so here's the paper I was referring to before by Feinberg and Willer, Kidwell, Farmer, and Hardesty. There's a whole bunch here. Getting liberals and conservatives to go green. Shifting liberal and conservative attitudes using moral foundations theory. So this is just up through 2016. There have been a bunch since then, but I've got 5 studies there that use moral foundations theory specifically on climate change persuasion.
Great. And I just put that link in the chat for everyone who wants to go check that out as well. All
right. Dr. Haidt, thank you so much, both for taking the time to be on the call, but also just for the work that you're doing. It does feed our souls in our organization, and I'm just so glad that you and your colleagues are doing this kind of work.
Oh, well, thank you. I thank you for the work you're doing. Again, this is what democracy requires. Not a lot of shouting and showing off, but actually working with people and legislators. And boy, giving legislators the social credit for taking risks, bravo. I see why the guy put that in his pocket, because they get so much negative feedback. It's so valuable that you're giving them positive feedback. So more power to you. I wish you all success. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to go for about another 10 minutes. If you have time, you're welcome to stay on, but I know you've got your family.
And I have to get back to writing this paper about how democracy is going to implode. So
okay, carry on. I hope we can have you on again sooner. So
hope so. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Okay. Well, September has already been quite busy with climate opportunities and happenings. I had to pinch myself when CNN devoted 7 hours to a town hall on climate change. You know, after all those years of not being able to get even one question on climate into a debate or a forum, it was just so refreshing to hear the moderators have to come up with question after question after question and think of all the prep they got to do. But my absolute favorite news came last week. It's that freshman Republican Senator Mike Braun of Indiana has teamed up with Senator Coons to start a climate solutions working group in the Senate. And that's similar to the Climate Solutions Caucus that we're familiar with in the House. Our Indiana volunteers have done just outstanding work building a relationship with their new senator. But I think all of us contributed to this by our repeated calls to our senators to keep climate as a bipartisan issue, or to make climate a bipartisan issue, and to start something like this working group. So Senators Braun and Coons are still working out the details of how the groups will operate. So I would like you to hold off on talking to your own senators about this, even though I am quite sure you're eager to do it. But please hold off on talking to them about joining until we get more details from Braun and Coons. It will be bipartisan, but we don't know for sure yet that the senators will be required to join in pairs. So I think the important thing to do for now is savor the news that a Republican from Indiana has stepped out on climate in a major way, and will alert you when it's time for action. So right now it's just time to savor that. I think the emergence of Senator Braun, though, as a climate hero in Indiana, to me is a reminder of why we work with every member of Congress as a potential supporter, regardless of what we think of the politics of our state or of that member of Congress. So again, good work, Indiana. And of course, we're all pleased to see how youth are stepping up and speaking up and holding adults accountable for carbon pollution. Their engagement is growing, whether that's under the leadership of Greta Thunberg and Sunrise, or Students for Carbon Dividends. And in CCL, we're seeing our own campus organizing grow under the leadership of our regional fellows on campuses. And we now have some new conservative outreach fellows. So conservative outreach fellows are young Republicans who are doing outreach to their peers and working with them to get their voices heard in Congress and their communities. You know, usually starting a new program like this can take months or sometimes years, but this is CCL and the time is now. We're seeing a huge amount of support among younger Republicans. And so some of our donors stepped up really quickly to fund this program when we started talking to them just 2 months ago. And as soon as we started putting out the word that we had the fellowships available, we had 5 strong applications within a week. And we now have 7 young Republicans getting to work in strategic places with their peers, and a few openings left. Well, I asked our CCL youth leaders, a couple of them, to share a few thoughts on organizing youth with us. So Ricky's gonna roll that video.
Hi everyone, my name is Destiny Lloyd and I am the Southeast Regional Fellow and a co-leader of CCL's Youth Action Team. And joining me today is Franklin Wu. We are honored to be on this call to tell you about the importance of working on youth outreach and engagement within CCL.
Hi, my name is Franklin Wu and I am currently a 9th grader at Lemoore High School in Houston, Texas. I see the impacts of climate change around me every day, and that's why I joined CCL and want others like me to do the same, to work on something that would really make an impact on climate change. Young people are extremely important in creating and working on climate solutions. After all, my generation and younger will be living with the impacts of the climate crisis for the rest of our lives. We understand what's at stake. As we inherit this challenge and learn to voice our concerns, we realize the power of our actions. Youth organizations are forming rapidly around the issue of climate change. As you may know, many of them will be marching in the streets all around the globe in the next couple of weeks. CCL can offer a space where young people like me come to find out what's next and are able to work on practical solutions.
We have learned that bringing young voices to the decision-making table is extremely effective and empowering to youth. The United Nations frames the significance of young people's involvement best. Youth constitute the majority of the population in many countries and have an increasingly strong social and environmental awareness, which has the power to transform our societies towards a low-carbon and climate-resilient future. We must tap into this potential as an organization. Though we've begun this process, as seen through the great work accomplished by Piper Christian, regional fellows, campus leaders, and younger people like Franklin Wu, there is much more that needs to be done. Many of you on this call are seasoned CCL volunteers, and you have the ability to support and guide younger people coming into the fold. And in turn, the youth offer a new perspective and a revitalizing energy to your chapter and this organization that will sustain us for years to come. If you or your chapter are interested in becoming more involved with youth outreach and engagement, please contact Sharon Bagatelle and I at youth@citizensclimate.org. Thank you.
Yes to youth. And thank you, Destiny and Franklin, for doing that for us. So here are the recommended actions for the month. In Canada, continue the actions from last month, focused on social media, campus outreach, and town halls. In the United States, take advantage of all the climate events this month to get lots of letters to the editor published, and also start getting ready for November Lobby Day. For those of you who didn't get to lobby with us in June, perhaps because the Lobby Day sold out really quickly in the summer, November Lobby Day offers you another chance to have that empowering experience. It's November 11th and 12th in Washington, D.C., and people from your chapter would be really glad to have you go and represent them there. And then also in your groups, make note of the bonus social media action as well and get somebody to snap a picture of your meeting and tweet it out. So the last thing I want to do today while we're all together is another live poll. So get your cell phones out so you can text us your response. The Yale Project on Climate Change Communications published an article in July that was called "Discussing Global Warming Leads to Greater Acceptance of Climate Science." And they found that people learn important facts about climate change through discussion with friends and family. So your climate conversations make a difference. But despite this finding, the Yale Project's spring survey on climate change in the American mind found that conversations about climate change aren't happening very much. 63% of Americans say they rarely or never discuss global warming with family and friends, while 37% say they do so occasionally or often. So which category are you in? So that's today's live polling question. It's a multiple choice question, and I'm going to read it out loud for those of you who aren't seeing this on screen. What I want you to do is jot down the number of your answer so you can text it to us. And after I've read the question, I'll tell you how to do that texting. So over the summer, on average, how many conversations did you have about climate change with people outside your CCL chapter? Again, over the summer, on average, how many conversations did you have about climate change with people outside your chapter? If the answer is none, you're going to write down a 1 or text that. 2 is a few times over the summer. 3, about once a week. 4, a few times a week. 5, at least once a day. Answers are coming in already. Again, for those of you who can't see, jot down 1 for none, 2 for a few times over the summer, 3, about once a week, 4, a few times a week, 5, at least once a day. So then on your smartphone, if you haven't done this, you open your texting app and you type 22333 into the to field. So that's who you're sending it to, 22333. And then for the message, you type in CCL123 and send. That's going to connect you with the poll. Right, so you simply type in the number of, after that, you simply type in the number of the response to the question. So again, to participate, send the message CCL123 to the number 22333. Type in your response, numbers 1 to 5, and send that text. So let's look at the results. Let's see what I can see. Okay, none is a very tiny little 1% so far. A few times over the summer, around a